Should have been here. It's right, man. That is a freaking
first day.
Nice one, man. Nice job. Now, when choosing the first topic of discussion for our how-to video segments, we decided to go with the spinning of our Steely Coon for intruder collars. For a couple reasons. One, it's our hottest selling item. We sell more of this than anything else. And two, simply the fact that it's the topic we get most questions about. Well, before we get to tying and spinning some of the Steely Coon, I just wanted to talk a little bit, about the concept and the history of the intruder collar. Before the intruder came to be, we all kind of opted for the rabbits and the marabous and stuff when we were tying our bigger patterns. But those materials they held a lot of water. They were really difficult to cast. They were hard to sink. Your fly basically just ended up looking like a mop in the water. And to be quite frank, you could slap as many of those materials on a shank as you wanted, and at the end of the day we really never achieved kind of the big silhouette I think we were all after. So once the intruder came to be, one of the most important steps in its evolutionary process was the introduction of the hair collar, using a stiff hair collar to hold your hackle material out. And that concept in itself kind of went down two evolutionary paths, where there was kind of the more Ed Ward style, where he opted for a stiff hair. Moose mane was a material that he really liked, where he would spin a moose mane collar in front of his hackle material, would act as a kind of a water foil that would then break the water and allow his hackle material to swim and keep the water from pulling his hackle material back against the shank, and providing that kind of big silhouette. And then there was kind of my concept, where I opted for more of a spun collar. That I spun a hair collar behind my hackle material, where I used a nice stiff collar that would then hold and support my hackle material and allow, once again, my hackles to swim, and kept the water from pulling my hackles back against my shank, just basically turning my fly into a stick. So both concepts work well. I know Ed's caught as many fish on his way of tying the intruder as I have mine over the years. So I'm not saying one's better than the other, but I've had a lot of success with my method, and I continue to use it to this day. When I first came up with this, first started using the hair collar, I lived in British Columbia, and my first choice ended up being a polar bear. One, it was easy to get when I was living up there. Two, it's hard to deny the fact that the polar bear has that nice kind of fishy, iridescent, natural sheen to it. Once you got good bear, it was pretty easy to work with. It was pretty easy to spin. And another thing was the fact that it didn't have a tendency to float. It was easy to sink the bear, where a more hollow hair like a deer hair or something like that had a tendency to want to float. And it really never made sense to me to want to slap a life vest on a fly that I was going to put lead eyes on and ultimately try to sink. So polar bear was a great choice in that sense, because it was an easy material to sink. But as I moved south back to the States, polar bear became harder to get. It was really expensive, and I personally just became more sensitive to the whole polar bear issue. I'm now opting for other materials, and my material of choice these days happens to be our Steely Coon. It's a select coon that we found and we process, and ultimately end up having, I think, the best polar bear substitute out there. It ends up having the same natural sheen that the polar bear has. It's really easy to work with. It's probably actually even easier to spin than the polar bear. And once again, it's not hollow. It doesn't have a tendency to want to float. It's an easy material to sink. And with some of the coloring and the banding and stuff that we have, I think in some ways actually the Steely Coon is superior to the polar bear. So just a real great material. I know, you know, the word on the street for years, everybody was kind of hot on the whole Arctic fox thing for intruders and for intruder collars, and it was just something I never really bought into. Never really a big fan of the fox. You know, our fox has its place. It's a softer material. Probably has more in common with you know, with rabbit than it does with the polar bear or a Steely Coon, in the sense that it's a real soft hair. It's a more of a swimming type hair in my mind. You know, I always called Arctic fox was just marabou on a hide, where you know, our Steely Coon and the polar bear, the hair itself has some real structural integrity to it. It's a real stiff hair, and provides great support for our hackling material. So ends up being a really great product for us, and is a great product for me when I'm tying personally. So anyway, let's get to the vise, and we'll show you how it works. A real great product to work with. Now let me show you how to spin this stuff here. I've already got my dubbing loop rigged up here, just basic dubbing loop, and I've got my piece of raccoon, and I got a little bit of goat hair that I've got that I'm going to use. I'll show you how I use that. But anyway, what we started with here is I got one of our 1 3/4 inch Steely shanks, and I'm going to tie an intruder style fly here. And I'm at the point here now where I want to put in that collar we've been talking about, to provide some kind of support for the hackle material that I will then put in front of this collar. So anyway, what we're going to start with here is just a little bit of dubbing, and this dubbing is going to do nothing more than, one, provide a little bit of color for us. I have a nice little color contrast up here on the front of my fly, and I'm not going to use quite that much of it. And what I'm doing here right now is I'm kind of pulling this, and I'm evening this hair out, trying to get all the hair from being untangled. So then when I put that on my loop will basically be in the middle of those hairs, and will give me the biggest kind of brush type look with my dubbing loop that I can get. So I'll put that in there, and like I say, that's going to be for color one, just a nice little color contrast, because then the actual Steely Coon that I'm going to use is this purple, and you can see it's got that beautiful sheen. Once again, it's very stiff. It's very similar to the polar bear in the sense that going to give us a lot of structural support there on our collar. You can see how stiff that is. You know, I mean, nice contrast with the purple tail and the kingfisher blue underbody. And anyway, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take a pretty decent little whack of this stuff, and see, I'm going to cut it right off the hide here. Not that much. And depending on just like with the bear, every piece of coon is a little bit different. Some of it has more under fur than the other. This one here doesn't have too much, so I'm not going to pull too much of it out. If it was too bushy, some of it has a lot of under hair that you'd want to remove a lot of that, so it just didn't end up, just, you know, that all holds water and makes the fly harder to sink and cast. So anyway, we'll pull that out. Before I thread my loop, I just want to demonstrate and show you once again how I kind of even that out. I've tried to kind of keep the end straight at the same time, kind of get it evened out, so it makes it a lot easier than doing it after I have it in my loop. So here we go. We're going to take this, and we're going to open back up our loop again, and you can see it's going to be real easy just to kind of slip that in there just like that. Once we have that in there, we can kind of then even it up again a little bit more, kind of brush it out and try to make it as even as we can. That makes it, one, it'll wrap nicer when it comes time to wrap our dubbing loop, and two, it'll spin nicer. It won't clump up so much. And there is a little knack to the spinning. The first time you try it, it's not going to be perfect, I assure you of that, but over time it will be something that you'll get real good at, and it's very easy. And as you could imagine, the stiffest ends of these hairs is the butt ends down here. So the more of this you leave, you know, kind of the bigger bulk, the bigger your collar is going to be. I'm going to choose, this isn't a real big fly, and I'm going to choose to cut some of this off. I don't want too much. But like I say, depending on the size fly and how big a silhouette you want, you'll make that decision yourself. And as you could imagine as well, you know, the more you kind of pull these hairs in and the further out on these tips you get with your dubbing loop, the softer it's going to be, and the smaller your collar will be once again. So the more you're out here on your butt ends, the stiffer this thing is going to be. And the biggest probably trick to this whole thing is as we go into the spinning process, is just not just taking your dubbing bobbin and just spinning and going crazy with it and just letting everything tangle. Just start off on it real slow, and then I use my little whip finish as a pick. Everybody's kind of got their own favorite pick, but this works real well for me to kind of pick it out as I go to keep it from tangling. And you'll also find by putting this little bit of a shorter length regular dubbing up here above your Steely Coon, that it will actually keep this from migrating up your dubbing loop, which can create a problem too. So this actually also acts as kind of a blocker, because this will want to travel up your loop if you don't. So it kind of serves a dual purpose. But I'll start to spin this, and as you can see, I'm not just going crazy with it. I'm kind of taking it easy, and as I see it kind of clumping and tangling, I'll then go in to start picking it out. And you don't want to get real aggressive with picking it out either. You'll pull it all out of your dubbing loop before that dubbing loop gets spun real tight. So just kind of go in there and easily kind of pick it out. And you know what, I don't know that the fish really care, but the longer you take with this and the more careful you are, the nicer it will look to your eye anyway. So I kind of take my time with it. But you can see, after a bit of time and a bit of spinning, taking your time, get spun out, and you can get fairly aggressive with your picking. Brushes out very nicely, and you can see how even that is and how nicely that's going to wrap. Nice stiff hairs, going to provide a nice stiff collar for us. And from here, simply what we do is we're just going to wrap this like any other dubbing loop. And as we wrap it, just be real careful. I always try to pull my materials back and wrap right in front of the next one. Like I said, making sure I pull my materials back, not to wrap over the top of them. Wrapping in front of each wrap continuously like that. As I move forward, pulling all my materials forward. Trying to be fairly careful not to wrap over those long guard hairs. You can see how nicely this is wrapping, providing a nice collar for us. Oop, that didn't blur on you. Getting up towards the front end of this. And once we get to the end, we're going to finish that off. Wrapping right up tight to our last wrap. And what you end up with is a nice collar. And we can even clean that up a bit more and get in there and pick that out. Some of those ends end up wrapping over the top of each other. And as we pick those out, it just cleans it up a bit more. I'm going to try to turn this, hopefully you can see that. Nice even collar all the way around. You want it to be fairly even. Gets too clumpy, your fly won't ride true. So kind of got to have those materials evenly distributed throughout your collar. So again, there we have it.